Cool. So welcome everyone to this week's Monk Stephen Dundee Mountain Chat. Allan will be talking about his Alpine adventures. So away to you, Allan.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. Cool. So once upon a time, it was possible to travel to all these amazing far-flung places like France, Switzerland, and Italy. It seems like a long time ago now, but so I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel out to the Alps now 6 times, and all times with Richard, but also other people in the club, Andrew, John, and others. And tonight I'm just going to give you a bit of a talk about my experiences, lessons learned along the way, places we went, things we did, that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping this will be interesting for anybody that's thinking about going out to the Alps for the first time. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about kit or skills and required. I think Dom might have done a talk previously about that. I'm more just going to be talking about what we did. Finally, just say thanks to Andrew and to Richard for allowing me to use some of their photos. Some of these are on here. So without further ado, cracking. So my first taste of the Alps was back in 2006. I was in the University Rucksack Club at the time, and DMC hadn't been born yet. I got the opportunity to go on this 3-day course with the Jonathan Conville Trust. It was kind of a subsidised course to introduce you to the Alps. On that, you learned the kind of main skills you needed. So one being glacier crossings, which I had never been exposed to before, and mainly how to avoid falling in things like this, so how to cross glaciers safely and avoid falling and things like this. But also, if you're so unfortunate, how to get yourself out again. So after doing this course and learning that skill and a few others, the plan was to meet up with John in Chamonix. He was coincidentally out in Arolla at the time doing a very similar course. And with all this new knowledge we'd learned, we were going to take on the world and grab lots of peaks around Chamonix. Sadly, the weather wasn't playing ball and our plans got scuppered. So about the only adventure we got was wandering around Snell Sports and looking out the window in coffee shops around Chamonix. So went back home again, and a few years later, it was around about Christmas in 2009, I got chatting to Richard, and we'd at the time been doing quite a few other things with the Rucksack Club and kind of getting out and bagging the Munros, and we were both quite keen. So I started chatting to him anyway about the idea of going back to the Alps, and we thought, well, we don't really have the skills needed. It'd been a while since I'd done this course. Richard hadn't really looked at this before. So we booked ourselves out onto a course at Classy Brennan for 3 days, which was a kind of introduction course to Alpine mountaineering, and managed to look rather silly climbing up, triffing with lots of unnecessary ropes and things. But nonetheless, it was good skills to learn and necessary for us to get out there. So our plan was to go to Arolla, where John had gone, which is also featured in the Alpine Essentials guide. It's a good place to go for a first trip. Arolla is kind of southwest Switzerland and canton of Valais down here. So flew out to Geneva and then headed out there by train and then post bus. One of the first things is that you've got to get all this kit out with you. So it's quite a lot to fit into the EasyJet 20 kilogram allowance. But thankfully, everyone knows me, I'm writing to my spreadsheets. So we had it all down to the gram and sorted out who was taking what, etc. And then we arrived safely in Arolla. So for anybody who hasn't been out to the Alps before or not familiar with this, basically the usual plan is you get to a valley base like in Arolla, set your camp up and stay there. You can leave any kit that you're not needing there at the campsite and then head up to a mountain hut, where from there you can then head up and do various peaks before coming back down. So in this case, our plan, we were staying at Arolla campsite first trip, and our plan was to head up this track, up to the Pas de Chèvre, and then down and over the Glacier Julien over to the Dies Hut, what was left, the Glacier Julien anyway. Yeah, so we headed off up that track, which you can see on the right there, and then got to the Pas de Chèvre. And I think all these hut routes, there seems to be something which is distinct about them that you usually remember. And the one from Dies Hut's got to be the descent down onto the glacier, down this 20-metre drop, part of which is on a ladder. So yeah, so you do that, and then you cross over the Glacier Julien, and then up to the hut, which you can see just where my pointer is on that kind of crop of rock over there. And you can see where I said what's left of the glacier, because it's quite melted. and there's not much left of the snow. So we arrived at the Dees hut anyway, and this is quite a comfortable hut. You get well fed and watered there, and breakfast provided. Well, if you like dry bread, that is. So we stayed there for the night, and then the next morning was our plan to do our first peak, which was going to be a very easy introduction, which was one called L'Alouette, which was a facile, and basically it was just a walk up the glacier and then up onto the kind of little ridge at the top, and then get to the summit. And that was at 3,500 meters roughly. So it's a good one as well for acclimatization, because generally you don't want to go up too fast, too quickly. So we did that, and then back down to the hut again, sorted out our kit, and had our dinner there. So second night at the hut, and we planned then to head up to Pin d'Arola, which is this peak over here, and then head over of the second hut we're going to be staying at, which is the Cabin de Vignettes. Apologies if my French is not quite right, but let's see if you get the idea anyway. And so the plan was cross Black over the Glacier Chilian, up this kind of steep slope here, onto this serpentine, then over to Pin d'Arola, then back down to the Vignettes hut. This was a slight grade up. It was a Facile Plus, and you can see the route we took over there, up onto this slope, avoiding the crevasses on the right there, and then up. And then that's a picture, I think, from the top of Richard there. So we headed over, and then we arrived at the Vignettes up. And thankfully, you don't have to approach it from this cliff. You can get around the other side, and there's a much easier access to it. But yeah, we managed to traverse this safely and get to the hut, which was another really nice hut to stay at. Stayed there the night, and then it was back down to Arola again, which was basically just a glacier plod back down to the campsite. At this point, back to the campsite, we were quite glad of getting back, because you've been in the huts for 3 nights. You tend to get a bit sweaty, so the campsite's got shower facilities and that, which we're quite glad of. But there wasn't much time to lose, because we wanted to get on to our next peak, which was going to be the Tête Blanche, which we were going to access from the Bertol hut, which was a bit higher this time. So the hut's about 3,300 meters, and we're going to go up to 3,700. So it's a good kind of next progression. We headed off next morning, and it was a fairly easy track up, and then you had some ladders and things to get to the hut, which was kind of perched on this copper rock up here. So it was not to be scared of heights heading up this, but generally it was fairly easy walk. And I stayed at the Bertol hut, which was probably the least nice of the 3 huts. I seem to remember the toilets had quite a memorable smell, but yeah, it was, nonetheless, you still looked well after, and stayed there for the night, and then headed up to the Tête Blanche the next day, which was another kind of glacier plod. But you were rewarded at the top with this stunning view. Picture doesn't really do it justice, but it was an absolutely amazing view over to the Matterhorn and Zermatt. So after that, we headed back down, and then we didn't stay a second night at the Bertol hut. We just came straight back down again, decamped, and we headed back down to Sion, where we stayed in a hostel for the night. So next morning, it was the case of going to our second base camp, which we got a train up to Visp, and then headed up to Saas-Grund, which is just below Saas-Fee. And it's the same procedure. Got there, set up tent, etc. And then there was no time to lose again. We were really keen, so we were straight up to our next mountain hut. Although this time we cheated, so we managed to grab a cable car that took us up to the Viesmees hut, was our destination this time. Got up there, and this was at 2,700, and we were kind of feeling quite good at this point. It felt like a bit of a holiday with a few beers, chill out. But that didn't last long, because the next morning we were heading off up to do the Lagenhorn, which was going to be our first 4,000 meter peak, which was a big thing. Not that we're bagging, but 4,000 meter peaks are a thing. So we were like, great, we're going to grab our first one the next day. And this was our first kind of real Alpine start, getting out in the dark in the morning. So we left at 4 o'clock, and left the hut, and then started this scramble up the west ridge of the Lagenhorn. It was fairly straightforward at the beginning, and then up to the top, up the kind of snow bits up here. I remember at the top it being a little bit delicate with some a bit of ice and that, but quite airy, but generally okay. And then grab lunch at the top, and this fetching photo of Richard here. Then it was a descent back down the Lagenhorn. We came down the glacier, which was quite a bit easier. It was a bit of a plod back down to the Wiesmies hut. On the way down, though, we saw a preview of what we were going to get up to the next day, which was going to be our first ever Via Ferrata, and what better way to do it? But it was going to be the highest Alpine Via Ferrata, which was called the Jägihorn. And you can see somebody just on it here. It's kind of a bridge, suspension bridge, I should say, going across here, kind of from this wire. So it's quite amazing. It was just to the north of the Wiesmies hut over here. And to give you an idea what was involved, it was just kind of a walk across the shale and then over and then up this route, which looks impenetrable, but it's quite a lot of help on the way. They've bolted on handholds and ladders and all this sort of stuff, so you don't have to be an expert climber to do it, but a lot of fun. This was supposed to be our rest day, actually, before doing the next 4,000. It ended up being a kind of 6-hour climb, which was loads and loads of fun. Some pictures of us climbing up there and Richard coming on. We had the kind of wire bridge then, that was me head across, and then Richard coming across. And this was a bit cheaty, but they had a kind of cargo net at the other end of it, which was to help, because otherwise you'd have to be a pretty good climber to get up the side of it. And then looking back down. A brilliant outing, and then it's back to the hut and get fed and ready for the main event of this trip, which was going to be doing the Wiesmies itself, which was another 4,000 metre peak that they were counting. So it's another early morning start. We're going to head up the northwest flank of the Wiesmies. So we headed off again, probably about 4 or 5 in the morning, and it was kind of a rocky start to the day, just up onto the glacier, and the idea was basically to traverse around this glacier and then up onto the ridge and then over to the Wiesmies, which is up top here. This is us crossing there, roped together obviously, there's quite a lot of crevasses on this. And then doing the kind of main bit at the top, onto the ridge. We've got this absolutely stunning picture of the top of the cloud inversion, top of the Wiesmies. It was really, really enjoyable. And then a pic of us on the top there. I'm quite proud there of the height, the 4,000 shown on the GPS. So on our way back down, I got this picture with Richard and the Wiesmies in the background, and you might recognise it because this was in July, and the Dundee Mountain Club was actually formed in September of the same year in 2010. So yeah, we needed some marketing material for the club for the first Dundee Mountain Film Festival that we went to, and for the website logo and all that sort of stuff. So we edited Richard out of that. Nobody wants to see Richard, and used the photo for the club. And one with John with the, the posted background. But still on the Wiesmies, coming back down again. Here you can see some of the kind of obvious objective dangers of the Alps, where you've got these snow bridges you're crossing and crevasses. The snow was starting to get a bit soft by this point. You know, the sun had been hitting it. So generally you want to get down obviously as early as you can. That's why you kind of leave really early from the hut. At this point we kind of had the knots in the rope, you know, just in case one of us did happen to fall through, and in the hope that it would stop, reduce the chance of going down too far. But always quite uneventful. It was a kind of easy descent, and you can see a group in front of us there actually, 4 of them there following the track. The top of the gondola is over here, back down, and the mountain hut we're staying at, Wiesmies, that's just over that hill there. And then looking back up again. So it was a very successful trip, and we got back down to Sasgrund and then headed up to Sassfien and had some drinks. That wasn't enough though for our first trip for 2 weeks, so we finished it off with another Via Ferrata because we enjoyed the Jägihorn so much, and we did another one up the last day, another one called the Mythikhorn, which was 3,000 feet. just outside Sassy. So pictures from there. We've got someone drilling in the background there. Then it was off to back to Geneva again, and then back home. And I think it's fair to say we were both feeling pretty stoked at this point. We'd completed our first trip, and it was all went pretty well. So a year passed, and then we were looking at Alps do, the second one. So this one was going to be more of us this time. It was going to be Andrew, John, Phil, Richard, and myself. Andrew, Phil, and me were planning later that year to do Mount Kilimanjaro. And Phil was an interesting one because basically he hates walking and had never done anything like this before. So he had signed up to do this Mount Kilimanjaro as a charity event. And good on him, he was really keen to prepare really well for it and wanted to get some exposure to altitude. So yeah, so he was going to join us basically for the first week of the second trip. So in the run up to the second Alps, we did loads of training, and you can see Andrew and John there doing some sort of tug of war behind in Moneyfieth, practicing crevasse rescue, and then Phil doing some practice on first time on crampons. I think it was up near Ben Lawers. Absolutely hating it, I'm sure, but yeah, we did all the training necessary before we headed out, and then we headed back to Arola again, and basically kind of repeated ourselves for the first part of the trip. Headed back up, 5 of us this time, up to the Desut. This year we went a bit later, and it was a couple of weeks, but I don't know whether it was that or just generally, but there was even less snow this year. It was the glacier was almost completely dry, but it was anyway back to the usual same pattern to the Desut. And this trip I took a few more pictures of the Desut accommodation. It seemed cosy but comfortable, and it was off up to Lalouette again as our acclimatisation and first peak. You can see again here, hardly any snow at all on it. It was just a quick, let's get up to it. And we got another stunning day, and some pictures of us on the top. And then back down again to the Desut, and of course I absolutely love this photo with us outside and just looking at the mountains. It was good. And then it was planning for our second night in the Desut, and this time John, Andrew and Phil were going to be doing what we did the previous year. They were going to be heading over to the Vignettes hut, but unlike us staying there the night, they were just going to head straight back down to Arola because they were hardcore and didn't need the rest at the second hut. So they were going to do basically the same route. Meanwhile, Richard and I had plans to do the Mont Blanc de Chilien, which is this one in front of us. And the day before, when we'd gone up to Lalouette, I'd taken some pictures of Mont Blanc Chilien from the route we're going to be coming up, which was up to this kind of col. And then the plan was to go up this ridge onto the glacier, which was supposed to be kind of a snow plod, up to the top of the Mont Blanc Chilien, and then back again along the ridge, down the glacier, back to the col, and then back down to the hut. And then our plan this time was also to just, rather than stay at Desut again, just to come straight back down to the valley. So anyway, we set off again really early the next morning, and Alpine start, and then this is us arriving at the col and starting our descent up the ridge. The ridge was a bit crumbly, but generally okay, and we made, from what I remember, fairly good time up the ridge. And then we got ourselves up to the start of the snow slope going up, and we found at this point that it was actually really icy, which probably shouldn't be a surprise given the lack of snow at the bottom, but you know the guidebook suggested it was more of a kind of snow plod, but it was pretty icy and quite scary really. So to go back a few slides, this was us coming up this part here, and you'll see that if one of us had fallen at this point, it wasn't really going to be a good day. You were going to land up at the bottom of here, and that would probably been the last Alpine expedition for sure. So we took it carefully, and we ended up protecting this part of the route all the way up with putting ice screws in between the rope, and so if one of us fell, then we weren't going to hopefully go too far. It did, however, mean that it took us a long time to get up this snow slope, a lot longer than intended. Nonetheless, we managed to get up, and you can see that's the track kind of followed up onto the ridge, and then we followed this up onto the top of the Mont Blanc de Chilien. And again, absolute stunning day, a really good climb. Interesting ridge at the top, And as you can see, is a group that had come across from our side and were heading back over. So the route back again was to follow down the ridge and then across here down the glacier again. So the descent is going here, and we were quite late in the day by this point. I mean, generally you want to try and get off the glacier by midday, but we were probably getting on for about 1 o'clock at this point. And then descending along back onto the glacier. Yeah, so coming down this glacier anyway, and I was leading at this point and basically went straight through the snow and ended up falling into a crevasse, which was yeah, quite a scary experience. So I ended up kind of hanging there with quite a big drop below me. Richard was above and thankfully managed to hold the fall, no problem at all. There was enough snow there at that point. He managed to get his crampons dug in, but I was kind of hanging in air and managed to get a load of snow down my back. And so luckily I managed to get my ice axe over the lip of the crevasse and haul myself out fairly easily. And then we proceeded back down onto the dry rock at the bottom. And, you know, thankful that we're down okay. And the irony of it, we were very close actually to the rock. You know, it wasn't you could see it within sight. It's like, we're almost down, but yeah, it just shows. So I suppose that was the first kind of lesson of our Alps trip, was, you know, falling into crevasses isn't a theoretical thing. All that kind of practice we'd done with the crevasse rescue and stuff was definitely necessary. Although we thankfully didn't have to use it in this case because, you know, I'd only fallen down a little bit, so we didn't have to, you know, do the whole getting ourselves out. It was still a reminder that, yeah, it's definitely a hazard. Also, I suppose another lesson that we learned here was that the conditions aren't always as you expect. So we thought we were going to be able to get up on the Mont Blanc Chilean a lot quicker than we did. But given the conditions, we had to take it a lot slower, which pushed the schedule back. But anyway, all safe, and we got down and then headed back to Dees Hut and then across to the ladder again, up to the Pass de Chèvre, and then back down to the camp. And Phil, Andrew and John, I think, had got back down before us. They had beat us. They'd had a really successful day as well, doing the similar route to what we did the last time in the Alps. And, we're all absolutely knackered. I think it's fair to say it's over 2,000 metres of descent down from the tops we were at back down to the, and a really early start for us all. So got back down to the campsite and then had a bit of a rest day. We headed down to Sion and bit of chill out. The weather was diabolical that day as well, so it's a good day for a rest day. And then it was a repeat again of the Berthold hut. We headed off up to this again, and Phil looking absolutely delighted with the whole experience there in that picture. You know, but we were blessed with a great day again. The next day it was back up to the Tête Blanche again, and Phil managed to get his taste of altitude at 3,700 metres. A bit of a way off from the 5895 mind you at Kilimanjaro, but, you know, still a good one. And the views again back across to Zermatt, this time a bit of cloud inversion. So it was back down again, back to the Berthold hut, and back down to the hut. We decamped at Arola, and at this point Phil was heading off, and we were going to be meeting up with Ewan, who was now with the club for a while. He was going to be meeting us basically out in Chamonix. So we drove over to Chamonix. Phil got the bus back to Geneva, headed back, and then we had a kind of day to kill. So John, Andrew, Richard, and myself did a Via Ferrata around Chamonix. And then we got our first glimpse of the next objective, which was going to be Mont Blanc. And we had, at this point, not had enough acclimatization to tackle this, but we had looked at it and we're really aiming to go for it. So when we met up with Ewan, we headed off to Italy and to the Gran Paradiso National Park in pretty awful conditions. But the idea here was that we were going to do another 4,000 metre peak, which was the Gran Paradiso, and headed up to a hut called the Vitrio Manuel hut. which allowed us to, it was quite an easy walk, and the Gran Paradiso was fairly easy as the 4,000 metre peaks go. So it's a good one that a lot of people use for acclimatisation when aiming to do Mont Blanc. This was us heading up, and it was absolutely heaving. There were just so many people on this mountain. This was us nearing the top of the Gran Paradiso at the 4,061 metres. We got to near the top of the Gran Paradiso, and there was just so many people on it, all falling over each other's rope, and in a bit of a pickle, that we decided that we weren't going to attempt to go the last 20 metres or so to the top. And lesson learned here that, yeah, some of these peaks can be incredibly busy. So we got the acclimatization that we needed anyway for our next challenge. So we head back down. And of course, being in Italy, it would be rude not to have pizza and pasta. So we did that at the bottom and had a bit of a chill out before travelling back to this time to Courmayeur. The plan was to basically do Mont Blanc from the Italian side, and we were going to be going up to a hut called the Ganella Hut, which was at 3,071 metres. Yeah, following up to the Ganella Hut and then across the the glacier up to the Mont Blanc. It was, to say the least, quite a big challenge to take on at this point in our Alpine career. And but nonetheless, we set off and give it a go. So this was rather than the normal route from Chamonix. So we headed up the Miage Glacier, and then there was you can see back down route here, and there was a nice kind of scramble. It was up to the Ganella Hut, which you can see the kind of route we were taking. And then we arrived at the Ganella Hut, which has recently been rebuilt, actually. It was kind of space age construction. It was pretty cool. And great views back down the glacier and then up. And this point, we got our first view of the route ahead. But the route basically was taking you across and then onto this glacier that you're supposed to follow, I think up the left from memory, and then cross over here. It looked pretty intimidating, to say the least, and lots of crevasses, and it was over 1,800 metres to climb from the Ganella Hut up to the peak of Mont Blanc. So we went back into the hut, and we were having a bit of a debate about it. Is this really sensible to be doing this? And then the decision kind of got made, because for us, the weather kind of turned at that point, and we were like, well, okay, we're not going to tackle this. It just the wind picked up and visibility was terrible. So we decided, no, we'll not go ahead with that. And lesson learned: don't bite off more than you can chew. We headed back down anyway, and got ourselves back to the campsite, chilled out, and then headed off. Another lesson we learned, I guess, on this trip was that if there's going to be 5 of you all out there with kit, then get as big a car as you can to fit all the stuff in. But another really successful trip, still, despite not getting the prize. We headed back again, and then a year later, it was time for Alps 3. And this time it was going to be 3 of us, so myself, Andrew, and Richard. And we were going back this time to Saas-Fee and Saas-Grund. This way. So headed out, again, usual procedure. And the plan was to head up to the Britannia Hut, which is at 3,000 metres. Okay, so the route basically was up from Saas-Grund up to, this thing at the bottom here. Yeah, it was basically up this the valley, and then heading up to the Britannia Hut by this track. So it was quite an easy trek up, and then onto the glacier, and then you can see the hut on the top there. We arrived there, but unfortunately the weather conditions were absolutely atrocious. It was really high wind, so we ended up just stranded in the hut basically. And I remember in the morning, funny enough, usually you get woken really early for breakfast, but the hut were kind enough to leave us to lie in for a bit, and played this music in the morning of "Oh, what a beautiful morning," while we could hear the wind battering on the windows outside. So it was an interesting experience. Next morning, thankfully, the weather improved a lot, and we wanted to get out and stretch the legs a bit. So we thought about basically heading up and trying to do this ridge that was quite near the hut. I believe Richard had found the route in the guidebook when we were in the hut, about heading up to the Central Allan Pass and then up to the Middle Allan along the ridge. So it wasn't a very ambitious trek, but good to get a bit of acclimatisation before tackling the Allan Horn, which was our plan for the next day. So we headed off, and then it was quite scrambly, a bit of a climb onto the ridge, and then up onto this ridge. And it was crumbly as anything. All the rock was really loose. The aim was basically to come up this ridge and then up to the Middle Allan. But there was a point where Richard was leading this and he was belaying us, me and Andrew, up behind him. We arrived at the stance where he was, and the whole rock that he had the rope behind started moving, and it was actually quite scary at that point. So we tactfully retreated, headed back down, back to the Britannia hut. And got prepared because the next morning was the plan to basically go out onto the ridge and then do the Allan Horn up by the Hubblegrat route, which was basically up onto this ridge here and then across onto the summit, which was another 4,000 metre peak. Not that we were counting these, but it was another tick. So it was an early morning start, 3 in the morning. Got away and then heading across. And you can see the route there in the background. It was kind of following up this snow track and then up onto the ridge. And then the route, it's a PD plus, so it was up another grade again. It was the hardest one we had done so far. The reason it had this higher grade was because of this bit really at the end, which was a bit of a climb. Easy climb nonetheless, but still a climb. So heading up onto the ridge, and let's see, it's a group in front of us there. They're approaching it. It was an absolute stunning day again. Really great outing and bit of cloud inversion again. Coming up the top. Then it was the final bit up to the peak, and Richard was leading at this point. Climbing crampons on, and then up onto the summit. So that was another one bagged. The descent was a fair bit easier, so we headed off this time off from the summit and then down this other side, having come up from Britannia hut, and you got to the Middle Allan station, where you could then basically get a train back down to Zermatt. So it was a nice descent, and we were quite glad of having bagged another 4,000er. Back down to Zermatt, we had some food there and noticed this cholera was on the menu. It's quite interesting, this dish. So I don't think we actually had the bravery to try it, but I looked it up after to see what it was from this picture I found. Supposedly this tart with potatoes and veg. So chilled out, had a bit of a day of rest the next day. Our next adventure, which was up to the Michabel hut from Saas-Fee. And this involved just quite an easy walk up to there, and then it was going to be a long snow slope plod up to the Nadelhorn, which was another 4,000 metre peak. Some pictures of our ascent, and then some pics of the hut, the Michabel hut, and then off to do the Nadelhorn. This was, I think, one of the highest, the 4,300 metre, nearly 4,300 metre peaks. That was another PD plus. Most of my memory of this one was it was a really hard plough through the snow, quite a lot of it, then up to the ridge. Yeah, I think Richard was leading quite a lot, and we'd established he was kind of a robot. He could just push his way through all these things, so we just pushed him up front and let him get on with it. I think we might have taken a few tons as well, but then it was up to the Nadelhorn, and really again another stunning day. Andrew must have been pissed off by all this trudging through the snow. He was looking pretty angry there, way down, but we managed to pacify him. There was a play park a bit further down where he went on the swings. So, and then it was sorting out the kit and getting ready for the next plan. And this was to pack up, and then we were going to be heading over to Zermatt. And we arrived at after the travels there at this absolute terrible campsite in Zermatt. It was just this tiny plot of land with this pretty unwelcoming guy that was running the place. But we got set up, and again, we just had to go to cafes again and drink more coffee and eat cake. It was just, you know, I was forced into this, but yeah, we managed to do that and chill out in Zermatt. Then we had a day of Via Ferrata, a bit more fun. But it hadn't escaped our notice that to the south of Zermatt, there was a whole load of 4,000 metre peaks. In fact, there was 5 of them that we were originally intending doing on the sort of Monte Rosa group. And the next day, we took the lift up from Zermatt and headed up to the Klein Matterhorn. The aim was basically to do the Breithorn, and then from there head down to this Eas hut, or refuge Eas. Our plan then was to head across to do Pollux and Castor, and then down to the Quintessella hut. We were a little bit worried at this point because the weather was looking a bit dodgy. The forecast for the next few days wasn't great. And we thought if we got this far and got to the hut, then we could end up being stranded there. There wasn't really an easy way to get back, you know, if the weather turned. But we hatched this backup plan that we would use in the worst case scenario, which was basically heading down to Italy and then somehow getting ourselves back to Zermatt. It was going to be quite a tough call because it's over a 4-hour drive in a car, and we weren't even sure it was possible public transport. So it was to be avoided at all costs. But we pushed on anyway and went for it, and we thought we had the weather window, but it was going to curtail doing all 5 of them. So we aimed instead just to do the 3. So this was us just coming off the lift at the top, heading up to the Breithorn. Again, we were really lucky with the weather at this point. It was great over to Breithorn. And then down to the Eas hut. So from the Eas hut, it was a plan to first of all go up and do Pollux, and then do this traverse across the Castor, and then down to the Quintessella. And to give you an idea what was involved, it was kind of a climb up here up to Pollux, scramble, and then across to Castor, traverse down to the hut. And it was going to give us another 2 4,000ers on top of the Breithorn that we were already bagged. So set off from the Eas hut next morning. There was a bit of a scramble up, and there was bits of it that were actually a bit cheeky, where they give you a bit of help with some fixed ropes and holds. That was a group ahead of us that were going up, and then that was on the top of Pollux. It was back down again, and then up to Castor. Really enjoyed this day. It was stunning weather, really interesting, varied route, and then up onto this, up onto the ridge. So originally, I think we'd planned on going over to the Nefetti hut and doing the Pyramid Vincent and Signal Cupper, but because of the bad weather forecast, the plan was basically to head back down Glacier up, down past the Monte Rosa hut, and then we were going to just head back out to Zermatt again. So we got up again really early the next day from the hut at 3,500 meters. Had to do a bit of a reascent again, and then it was back down the glacier. It was a kind of long descent. Andrew behind and Richard, and you can see the Matterhorn again in the distance. You can see some of the other nice objective dangers of alpine mountaineering here with seracs. You know, these, I'm sure some of these were dropping as we were going down. It was to be avoided. And then there was some crevasses, obviously, to be careful of when we're crossing. But thankfully, there was no repeat of the Mont Blanc de Chilien experience. None of us went through. We managed to descend this quite safely and got ourselves back to the Monte Rosa hut, where we stopped for a well-deserved break and had some food from there. But the day wasn't over. We still had to get ourselves down the rest of the glacier. It was a bit of a kind of dry glacier, let's call it, at that point. There wasn't any snow covering, but we managed to get down, and then there was a bit of a ladder that it took us back to the Gornergrat station, where we were going to get a train that would take us back down to Zermatt again. So another fantastic day, and this is us on the train back down to Zermatt again, with a nice view of the Matterhorn again in the background. Of course, some well-deserved pizza. one of the memories I had of this, of us being in Zermatt, was some of the evening entertainment. There was this guy who liked to play the piano with his feet that was playing this bar, and he was a bit of a character. He used to wear this tie on the back of his head. He was a bit crazy, so it was a bit of fun what we had on the last night, and quite a few drinks were had before heading back to Geneva and then back home again. And that concluded the third trip that we completed. And then it was on to 2013. And this is the last one I'm going to talk about. So I think the first 4 were the best trips that we did. And this one has a good ending, I think. So there was unfinished business from the previous trip back in 2011. We wanted to do Mont Blanc. But this time we're going to do it the sensible way as a first attempt. We're going to do it via the normal route up to the Gutter Hut from Chamonix. But we first had to get acclimatized, so to go up to the height of the Mont Blanc at 4,800. So yeah, we headed out, and this time we were going to be doing it was Richard, Ephraim, and myself, and we were heading back again. This time to Romance Zinal Valley, which is just to the east of the Arola Valley. Been to the first couple of times. And Richard and I were first of all on our own. We headed out there, and the plan was to meet up with Ephraim later on. So our first trip here was up to the Cabin de Moray, which was at 3,300. And we were really careful this time. We wanted to make sure we got the acclimatization right, because I mean, on some of the previous trips, I'd suffered a little bit from altitude, so we wanted to make sure that we were going to be doing this gradually and getting ourselves up to the ability to do Mont Blanc. So we headed up to Cabin de Moray and then did the Pin de la La. And then we did another peak, which was the Points de Morte. And I wondered actually if this meant points of death. It was a PD plus. I looked it up and it actually doesn't. And it wasn't as dramatic as the name would suggest at all. It was quite an interesting peak though, at 3,500 meters, not a bit of it. Quite a nice ridge to it. It was really interesting. We saw a skier on top of that and border coming down this. So then it was back down again, and we met up with Ephraim at the campsite we were staying at, and then we were going to head up to the Truckee Hut, which was another one at 3,200 meters. So we set up there, and this was quite a nice, a very comfortable hut. It had actually had bunk beds in it and separate rooms and everything. It was a bit of luxury, really. And from there, we headed up and did the Bischorn, which was a 4,100 meter climb. And credit to Ephraim just coming straight out and meeting us and doing this, because without any other acclimatization. But we went up here, and I think the conditions weren't great, but you know, I think we got better conditions later on, and it was managed to get this one in the bag. Another 4,000 meter peak. And then it was back down for some beers and entertainment at another pub in Zeno. And then from there on, we headed back then this time. We thought we really enjoyed doing the Allan the previous year, and thought this would be another good one to do, and also helped in our acclimatization. So it was back round to Saas-Fee again, and back to the Britannia Hut, where we took on the Allan again. It was up the ridge, and got lucky again. Weather was absolutely fantastic. And this time I got a turn to lead it, since Richard done it last time. And that was us on the top of the Allan with Ephraim there and Richard. It was the same story again, back down. We went back up to the Britannia Hut this time. And the plan for the next day was to do the Alpha Bell, which was at 4,200 meters. Again, a good progression for getting the acclimatization up. And the plan was to come down from the Britannia Hut and then get back up onto this glacier again, up to the Fee Joch, and then around up to the Alpha Bell Joch, and then up onto the Alpha Bell. Really early morning start again, complete pitch black. It was going to be quite a long route, this one. And any part of interest here was this tunnel that we had to go through to get between the two glaciers in the dark. And we were joking about the possibility of zombies, etc. But thankfully none of them were encountered. We managed to get through onto the glacier and make the climb. This is me taking a photo of my watch here, just thinking how crazy we were at 5:30 in the morning, and it's sun's just rising, heading up the glacier. It was a pretty hard work from what I remember, trudging through the snow. You were sinking quite deep into it, and up here. But then once we got up, it was onto the ridge, which was a bit scrambly and rocky. Some loose rock again was definitely a feature. And then across. But the issue was that we were at this point, because of the ground that we were on, it was quite slow moving, and we got along. And eventually we had the summit of the Alpha Bell in sight, but we were looking at our watch and going, you know what, this is probably not safe to continue here, because we wanted to get back down and off the glacier before it got too soft, and certainly didn't want a repeat of falling through into any crevasses. So there was no summit fever with us. We decided quite sensibly, we're going to knock this one on the head at that point, and headed back down and back to the valley. So then on, it was a journey over back to Chamonix again, and I think we were all feeling really good at this point. We had some good acclimatization, feeling great and rare and fit and ready to go and to tackle Mont Blanc. And the weather conditions were absolutely perfect. It was really blue skies, and the forecast was supposed to be good for the next several days. So excited to get cracking. And then I suddenly took ill. There was this French vomiting bug virus thing that was going around at the time. So I'll not go into a lot of detail, but I ended up spending a lot of time using the facilities at the campsite, and there was basically no way that I was going to be going up Mont Blanc at this point. So Ephraim and Richard pushed on and went for it, and I was left at the bottom, feeling sorry for myself, and looking up at the mountain, imagining them grabbing the peak. It was so I was having wandered around Chamonix at this point, and yeah, generally starting to feel better. It was thankful. It was one of these things where it's the kind of 24-hour thing where you feel absolutely awful, and then it kind of went away again, and I started feeling good again. So I was thinking, oh, this is a nightmare. I've got this ideal opportunity to go and do Mont Blanc, and I'm not able to do it. So I went into the village and went to the guide's office. Thought, I wonder if I could get a guide to do this, and it wasn't going to be easy, trying to get this sorted out and get another booking. Meanwhile, Ephraim and Richard had done the peak. They came back down again and met up with me back in Chamonix. They were totally stoked having done it and everything, and we went out for a meal and everything. And I was talking about my, how I was wanting to do it, and talking about getting a guide and everything. And then at which point Richard, the absolute legend, basically said he would be willing to do it again. So it was absolutely incredible offer. So, and this wasn't a mean feat. I mean, it was a good, few thousand meters of ascent. It was so. It involved us changing our flight plans and everything back. We ended up pushing the EasyJet flight back again. I was completely excited. So yeah, we set off anyway and headed up. I think it was the next day, and the idea was basically head up to Lafayette, and you get a tram from there up to the Bellevue, and then a kind of gondola thing up to the Neg d'Aigle. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but yeah, you start off at 2,300 meters, and then there was the walk up past the Tete Rouge hut, making all that ascent. Richard looks like he's smiling there. He's not ready to punch me, which is good. So I have been doing this again. So one of the main kind of things on this climb is the Grand Couloir that you've got to cross, which is basically this gully with lots of rock that kind of pings down it, and you've got to essentially get across it without being whacked. There's absolutely nothing you can do to protect yourself. The only thing that's recommended is just basically to get across it as fast as you can. So Richard was taking this risk on twice, and we got up to it, and there's a bit of a rope thing that goes across, but basically you just have to essentially run and get across it as quickly as you can. And then it's a kind of scramble up on the ridge at the top half of it. If we go back to the map again, you get across this Grand Couloir, and then it's a kind of steep climb up to the Gutter Hut. So it's about a total of 1,400 meters climb, and then from there another 1,000 meters up to the top of Mont Blanc. So we arrived up, and then up to the Gutter Hut, which you can see in the background there. That's at the one at 8,000. And this is arriving at the hut. Got well fed and looked after here, and then not much sleep really at that sort of altitude. However, the next morning, the set-off time was around about 2 a.m. in the complete darkness. And I have to admit, for having had this virus just a few days earlier, I was feeling incredibly good at this point. I think I completely recovered, and we got out, and loads of people in front of us, lots of little head torches in the distance, kind of a really bizarre situation. You're heading out, and you've got this view back down to Chamonix, the lights below. But we absolutely stormed it up the hill. We managed to pass quite a lot of people that were in front of us, and we headed up to the top of Mont Blanc, basically. This is some of the pictures of the summit. And then we reached the top around about 5 a.m. at the top of Mont Blanc at 4,800 meters, and got a superb picture. We didn't hang around long, mind you. It was pretty cold. It was -20 wind chill at that point, and I think it was a case of taking a couple of snaps, and then it was back down again. And you can see the sheer number of people behind us, all these little ants on the hill as you're coming down again. Yeah, pretty popular one, as you can imagine. And there's again a picture from behind us. We didn't stop. We stopped briefly, I think, at the Gutter Hut and got some food, but then we pushed on and just headed back down again the ridge, back across the couloir again, and back down into Chamonix. And I have absolutely no idea how we managed this, but having got up at 2 in the morning and all the activity of previous days, but we got back down, had some food, and then we ended up going out drinking in Chamonix that night, which was a really great way to end the trip, and then headed back again. So absolutely unbelievable times, really great experience. Been fortunate enough to be enjoying all these experiences with Richard and other people that have joined us on these trips. Yeah, I can take any questions now. Thank you.
Amazing, well done.
Well done for the Mont Blanc. It's great. And for the rest, your trips. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Richard, what were you thinking when you said you'd do it a second time?
Well, I really don't know. Well, the bookings for the Mont Blanc hut is like chocker, because I think what Allan didn't describe was there were these 5 a.m. phone chats about a month before, where the next day's booking for the hut came online, and you had to sort of like get in as quickly as possible before it booked out. So that the day when I went up for the second time, originally the thing would have been booked out online, but spaces became available in the week, and it's when Allan found out that there was a space available in the hut. I mean, it seemed like, an opportunity too good to waste, really. The weather was so perfect, you could have done almost anything in the Alps. The weather was so good that week.
Well done. Lovely pictures.
Thanks.
What date did you go up there? Because I climbed Mont Blanc in 2013 via the Gutter Hut. I walk past you in the dark sometimes.
Maybe, yeah. I can tell you, actually. Give me a second. It was the 12th of July.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, as Richard said, ideal conditions. Yeah.
Alan, you kept saying you weren't counting them, but how many of the 4,000 meters have you done?
I don't know. I'm not counting them.
Oh, so he says.
Oh, you liar.
Oh.
Alan, did your friend ever make Kilimanjaro?
Yes, Phil did. Yeah. Me, Andrew, and Phil later that year went to Kilimanjaro and did it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It was really good on him actually, given, you know, doing that and coming out, especially when he hadn't really done much in the past.
He's not been up a hill since, has he?
No, I think after Kilimanjaro, he was like, well, I've done the highest now. I'm not going to do anything that's higher than that. So there's not any point in going up the mountains. I think it was his philosophy.
And Allan, before going for this trip, did you have a specific training a few months before?
Yeah, we were doing a lot anyway. I mean, I think around that time we were getting pretty obsessive about doing all the Monroes. So I think I was out, you know, most weekends doing things. And in terms of skills training, I mean, obviously we did the Alpine course in Place Brennan on the initial trip, and we were practicing the crevasse rescue stuff before we went out each time, because it's not something you can. You don't use it obviously at all in when you're doing anything in Scotland. So it's a thing that obviously you've got to try and remember each time what it's all about. So we did a lot of this kind of skills practice each time before we went.
And you say you did some acclimatation before going to the 4,000 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So you never had some trouble with I don't know, being breathless, or so it was always okay for you?
The side effects I've had a few times is headaches. Never really bad, but I think one of the times on the Britannia hut where we just went straight up there to the 3,000, and that was the time we were stormbound as well. I don't know why, but that time I just had a really raging headache. But usually, if you take it easy and initially and you know, gradually increase it, then it's fine.
Yeah, I've had throwing up a few times, a symptom of altitude sickness.
Yeah.
But not too bad, and difficult eating, I find a lot. Feeling sick. But...
I've had headaches. Like, we went to Zermatt 2 years ago and got the cable car up to Kleiner Matterhorn, which is like pretty high. And I think we've gone up Brighthorn that day, maybe. But I felt like really bad when we got back to the cable car, and then fine when we descended. So
when we did that up to the Brighthorn, you know, it was thankfully we'd already done a week by that point. Yeah. So yeah, I was all right.
Yeah, we'd been on Salpabel like 2 days before, but that was fine. But I don't know.
Which is higher, of course, which is
yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever have any problems at all, Richard, or were you always all right?
Yeah, the felt time. Yeah, I mean, mild headaches. I think, particularly in the first couple of years. I think some of that's just like, you know, knowing how much you need to drink, and probably actually taking some electrolytes with water, not just plain water, would probably have helped quite a lot. I mean, naturally, everyone starts breathing quite hard when they're towards the summit of Mont Blanc, but then you've only got about half the oxygen in the air, well, a normal breath of air that you would have down at sea level.
I think the thing I found with the altitude is just things seeming harder. You sort of go like, you're like, why am I so out of breath, and like, why does this feel awful?
Yeah.
It's like just like not anything really, or like, I don't know. Just remembering that and sort of being easy on yourself and not trying to push too much.
I remember one time in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, I was myself and Chris Butcher heading up a 4,000 meter peak, well, just 200 or 300 meters from the top, but 200 or 300 feet, so about 100 meters from the top. we met an old guy, really old guy, coming down with 2 sticks. Got chatting to him. He was 90, down off this 4,000 metre peak. And then 2 days later, we're heading up another 4,000 metre peak in the Rockies. And here's the same guy, having been to the summit before us, on his way down. It's amazing. It gives me hope for the future.
Absolutely.
I've still maybe got 32 years ahead of me.
Yeah, I think it's a thing if you can acclimatise, then no stuff. I went to Mount Kinabalu in Borneo, which is like 4,000, but like, there's porters going up to the huts, and they're just like can just do it like easily. Whereas the sign like 800 meters to go, like not like I think distance, not ascent, and it was like the worst 800 meters.
The thing about Colorado, I suppose, too, is that people, if you're living in Denver, you're at like 5,000 feet anyway.
Yeah.
And some towns, like small towns and stuff in the Colorado Rockies, are at 8,000 feet. So if you're living there all year round, then it's the valleys in the Alps are actually quite low by comparison. It's unusual to be starting below sort of 9,000-10,000 feet. So quite often you're starting at 3,000 meters, whereas in the Alps you're much lower when you start. So if you're kind of camping at that 3,000 meters for 2 or 3 weeks, then you do acclimatise quite quickly.
How did you find routes in the Alps? The thing I always struggled with is finding decent guidebooks to tell you places, or finding that aren't like massively outdated.
They are massively outdated, aren't they?
Yeah, so those, I think Allan showed that white cover slide. Didn't they get updated a few years ago?
These ones.
Yeah, because we started, they were first written in 1990. And a lot has happened, obviously, in the 20 years since our first one in 2010. But I think they did update some of them about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. One of the things I did was look at some of the sort of like mountain school, like International School of Mountaineering, see what trips they were actually putting on. Yeah, stuff they were prepared to guide for others. And that's how I got the idea of the Monte Rosa chain of peaks.
Yeah.
They put on a similar thing. I mean, that's a bit of a giveaway. If they're prepared to guide it, then
yeah, it's not too hard. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All your trips, Allan, have you like moved around places mostly? So not just, you haven't just had like a base and then gone up and down that?
No, we've usually made it kind of 2 bases on all the trips. Yeah, apart from the last one.
Yeah.
Which I think worked out pretty well actually, because obviously you don't want to be traveling around too much, and especially we only hired a car on one of the trips, so we were taking post buses and trains and things. So.
Did any of you speak French, or did you manage to get away with just English quite?
Petit peu.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit, but it's like trying to remember what I learnt at school.
Right.
Thanks, Allan. That was good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nostalgic about that. Can't believe it was like 10 years ago now.
That's mad, isn't it?
You're so young in the pictures.
I was going to comment on that when you showed the first pictures.
Yeah.
The pictures not changed at all.
Youth.
Right, everybody, I'm going to head off. So thanks for that, Allan. And I don't know who's coming tomorrow, but you're going tomorrow, aren't you, Allan? So
yeah. See you then. Yeah. Cheers.
See you at Dawson Park for some circus training or whatever it is we're supposed to be doing.
See you later, Dave.
Can't wait. See you. Cheers.
Right. Yeah. Cheers, then.
Yeah.